Praise Malakath, and welcome to Dibella's Chosen, the 2D and 3D art panel here at ModCon 2021. I'm your host, your MC, UCM, and with me, I've got 5 very talented artists across all of our mod projects. Let's go around and introduce yourself. You give us a little bit of information about yourself, what project you're working on, how you joined it, and what your focus is.
Hi, I'm Argor. I am the 3D, 2D lead on Beyond Skyrim Cyrodiil, one of them. We have 2. And also a writing lead on Beyond Skyrim Cyrodiil. I also help with BS Argonia and Roskria. I joined in 2015, prior to Broomer's release. I'm the one who made the College of Whispers and Sin on Roams, for instance. And I joined because the scope of Beyond Skyrim just really inspired me to want to learn how to make my own kind of content.
Hello UCM, praise Malakath everyone, and especially hello chat. I'm Dal, I'm the current concept art lead of the Skywind project. Besides concept art, I also do some texture and 3D work, and I'm additionally a teacher for concept art on the Arcane University. Besides taking care of the concept art, I'm doing my best to continue the work of my former leads by keeping the design language for Skywind harmonic and uniform, so it feels like one game in the end and not just like a bunch of random sub-projects bundled together in one download file. And I decided to join the project because I watched one of the developer videos and just thought, why not apply? Let's just do it. I'm bored. Let's go. And I was actually accepted. And over the course of a year, I devoured my former lead, third son, slowly and cruelly, and collected his power and became the new lead, as is tradition.
Hello, I'm Cuddlewitch. I'm one of the 3D leads at Skyblivion. I'm also a teacher at the Arcane University and a consultant on Iliac Bay and more at Beyond Skyrim. I spend a lot of time helping members, especially new ones, with understanding the constraints placed on 3D art in the Skyrim engine and how we get their art into the engine. I've been part of the team for over 4 years now and was asked to join by the Skyblivion lead Rebel, who knew me from my time as a past 3D lead at Skywind.
Hi, my name is Nick, and I am a concept artist for both Skywind and Beyond Skyrim. And I'm mainly a character designer, weapon and armor designer, as well as a prop designer for various assets. My experience started with Beyond Skyrim Morrowind, and after some time my work was noticed, and I joined the crew of Skywind. And I decided to join the project mainly because I am a huge Skyrim nerd, and I wanted to grow as an artist and doing what I like with what I love.
Apologies. My name's Rob C.B. Wilson, and I joined Beyond Skyrim in 2015 as a level designer in Morrowind as a result of seeing a Skywind trailer. And I moved to Elsewhere in very early 2017 as a member of the lead team and became the overall lead 2 years later. And I do both level design and 3D for the team. I've also been the PR lead for Beyond Skyrim since 2016, and I joined Roskria around about the same time, and I now also help Argonia with their PR.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet all of you. Obviously, never talked to any of you before. Definitely never worked with any of you. So it's really nice to meet you.
Hey.
So we have a few pre-prepared questions, as the other panels have. But before I ask those, I would just like to remind the audience, please send in any questions that you may have for our 2D and 3D panelists. And we will get to those right after we get through a few pre-prepared questions. So the first question is about sort of the culture of your province, of your projects. While designing the people of your province, can you describe some of the challenges you faced in creating a unique, interesting atmosphere? Anything you're particularly proud of? And let's start with Rob.
Yes, absolutely. So for us, it's the Khajiit themselves is our biggest challenge. They have 16 different fur stocks, which is morphologies, and we're planning on using them all. So we have everything ranging from something that looks a lot like a house cat, but shouldn't be treated like one, right up to giant humanoids and massive panthers. So the challenge for us is that while everything is not going to be used by every single fur stock, we have to design something that can be used by each of the first docs to perform a specific task. So, for example, farming. Only certain first docs will be suited to that role, so they'll have clutter that fits. On top of that, of course, every Khajiit has to eat and sleep, so we have to come up with a wide range of objects that can be used by a wide range of sized animals to work within elsewhere. The thing that probably we're most proud of is something that we've noticed over the last year, which is that the people who follow Beyond Skyrim are beginning to notice how deep we go into the design process and how much care and attention we put on even just banal little items like spades and shovels and plates, etc., which is very rewarding. It's great that is actually being noticed. In terms of what I enjoy the most, we get to play around with bright colours, which is something that a lot of the other teams don't get to. Yellows and oranges, and Soph is always telling us, no, that needs to be brighter, which is a lot of fun.
I just want to say one thing as an outside observer. I love people's reactions when they learn there's 16 different types of Khajiit. That's always fun to see.
Yeah, it's great. The variety is massive. I mean, and it's everything from it is really everything from a house cat to a very large panther and everything in between.
One of those really cool things about the lore, absolutely.
Absolutely. Next up, Nick, can you tell us about Morrowind?
Sure. So, as for the people of the Dark Elves, the strong point of interest is surely their richness in culture, ruling houses and noble tribes that create a diversity in culture and style that really makes Morrowind a land alien and unique. Now, if you imagine the Dummer as a triangle, you have on one side the Dummer who have embraced the Empire and their costumes and culture, the followers of the Almisivi Tribunal on another side, and the noble tribes of the Ashlander people, descendant from Velot, on the other. And so that is reflected in their armor and weapons and costumes and design. And that is really interesting because they space from blacksmith masterworks of weapons and design to the more salvaged and scrapped armor that can be found by the tribesmen of the Ashland, made out literally of pieces of animal stick together and wrapped up around the sticks and pieces of metal. So that is for sure one of the best things I think it is in Morrowind that really helps create a unique style, and that is one of the things I really like the most. The constant coexistence of all these different culture and beliefs really helps to describe how really vivid and alive is the land of Morrowind, and it is in a constant change, and in both Beyond Skyrim and Skywind we actually are put into that changes.
It's always interesting to see just the huge gulf between cultures, but the same people. And speaking of cultures and the Empire in particular, Kettle, can you tell us about Skyblivion and Cyrodiil?
Sure. Probably the biggest challenge we found is in creating a style for our culture is bringing objects up to a modern level of 3D quality while retaining the essence and recognizable factor of assets from Oblivion. So striking that balance between nostalgia, modern interpretation, and readability. Fortunately, Skyblivion has both an excellent 2D and 3D team who, they're all fans, basically, of the game, which goes a long way. The 2D team, in particular, are heroes. They go through, maybe a dozen iterations on most things before handing a final iteration over to 3D, who usually will get it spot on first time, to be honest.
Love our 3D people. We need more of them.
Absolutely.
So this next question is for everyone. Just a quick lightning round, really. Aside from the cultures of people in your own project, what stylistically is your favorite culture in Tamriel? Argo.
I think I would start off by saying the Dwemer and the dwarves of Tamriel, really. I think they add that little bit of sci-fi to the fantasy setting, which is the Elder Scrolls, and that just makes it so unique to me.
For me, it's a gadget, because for 12-year-old me, playing Morrowind for the first time back there, the Neverwind will just always remain a female gadget, so gadgets just have a special place in my heart forever.
For me, it has to be the Slow to Thras. Slugmen Necromancers, best hope to break the back of Alinor and the Thalmor. What's not to like?
So, as for me, I would say that the Imperial of Cyrodiil are by far my favorite. I am a huge fan of mixing pieces of armor, weapons, and other things to create all sorts of original concepts that have a vibe or a little bit of everything. So their ability to absorb and integrate the various culture and their style and identity and put them all together in a polyedric environment really gives me the idea of an empire based on the unity of different races and culture who coexist in the same world. And I think that is really the strongest and more likable point of the Imperial.
And for me, it would be the Bosma. It's both the law, the Green Pact, and the Meat Mandate, which are contradictory, but also very interesting and quite nuanced as well. And also the way that they live, the fact that they are harmonious with nature.
The anti-vegetarians. But I do love how some of you seem to admire each other's projects, such as Dal liking the Khajiit, and Nick enjoying the Imperials. It's nice to see. So the next couple questions are getting a little more technical, a little more team focused. What devices or tools do you use or have you developed to ensure that your team understands the culture, beliefs, and style of your province or project? Rob, how about you start?
Yeah, so Elsewhere as a team, since I took over as lead, has become hyper-organized with a massive focus on documentation, particularly how-to guides and things to help people do tasks faster. The really unique thing is actually a massive shout out to Sother, our 2D lead, who created a brilliant style guide, which has actually been publicly released. We have an internal and an external version, and that really helps to illustrate and explain the Khajiit visually, which is so important with both 2D and 3D art, that you can look at a series of images and go, yes, I understand now how the Khajiit think, how they work, and how their environment is shaped. Because we're a small team, we're also constantly exploring new ways of explaining Elsewhere, both most internally and externally. And we've done things like we've just released our first audio lore book on our YouTube channel, which is again something else that we've done that none of the other teams in Beyond Skyrim have done. And the last thing would be lots and lots and lots of Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah, absolutely. Excel spreadsheets among things like Trello and Google Drive are extremely useful for us over on Beyond Skyrim. I on Cyrodiil generally keep track of claims people have once a month with check-ins, and I update their current projects on Trello. And it's through this process that we incorporate all the different research we do through the 2D concepting, which helps make the world feel very alive. Doing your research is very important for concepting. You got to make sure you look at real life references, because that's what really helps make the world come to life. And absolutely making sure you keep track of all those references is what things like Excel spreadsheets, Google Drive, and Trello are fantastic for.
You would be amazed how much detail has to go into those spreadsheets, I'm sure. All of that, keep track of all of that. So it sounds like both of your teams have a lot of very good structure. How about our remake projects? How do Skywind and Skyblivion handle their structure? Let's start with Skyblivion. Kettle?
Well, the 3D department is actually broken into specialities. It's probably the largest department overall at the project. You've got armor and weapons, creatures, architecture, general 3D, which would include clutter. They all have their own departments and department leads, and the teams tend to be made up of artists who are very much specialists in that particular type of 3D. So I don't think it's a very common approach amongst the projects in the community, but it's allowed us to make a lot of progress in the last 2 or so years with, we get members to focus on the stronger skill sets. Helps a lot.
And Dal, how about Skywind?
The Skywind uses a lot of the tools Argo had already mentioned also. So we have so many Excel sheets. We have like 6 Trellos currently and counting. We're using Miro for nav meshing. We have a OneDrive to back everything up. And we use GitLab for our Q&A stuff. And for our exact 2D and 3D process, I have this really big master Excel sheet list, which seems endless when you take a first glance, but which is already reduced to like the last 7 and 8 entries, which means Skyrim is nearly done with the concept art. Whoop, whoop, clap, clap. And from there, I pull the task which needs to be done most urgently next and give those to my concept artist, like Nick, for example. He's one of my concept artists on Skywind. And then they just start with simple first iterations, and those first iterations get posted on the Discord to receive feedback, because there's so much to consider when creating a good piece of concept art. The culture, the shape language, the patterns used, the item's age, history, the context of its use. And in the end, it needs to fit with the rest of the world, with the designs we made so far, but it still needs to stand on its own. So it usually takes quite some time until we nail a concept art and until everyone is reasonably satisfied. You can never satisfy everyone 100%. From there, I move the concept art to the 3D Trello, so the 3D lead finds a fitting artist for the item. We don't have specialities in 3D like Skyblivion, but we do have people which we just know who likes to make clutter, who likes to make creatures. We just don't have like fixed teams for that. And the 3D artist most of the time goes back to the 2D artist and asks like, hey, what did you mean with this pattern? Or could you draw this from a different angle? Because, this conversation between 2D and 3D is just really important to making great 3D assets. And once this is done, once the 3D mesh and the textures are done, all of that gets uploaded to our OneDrive. And then it's linked in the implementation Trello, because implementing things into the creation engine is pain. And we have an extra department only for that. And if the audiences want to know how the implementation process is continued from here and how much pain it is, tune into the implementation panel tomorrow.
It's not that painful. Please volunteer. Please. So, while we're talking to you guys, Skyblivion and Skywind, can you tell us what aspects of the original games, Morrowind and Oblivion respectively, what aspects of the culture or style have you kept, and what, if anything, have you decided to change? Why? And let's go back to Kettle.
Well, because of the nature of Skyblivion being, for all intents and purpose, a remaster or port of Oblivion, we've kept almost everything. Some mechanics just aren't in the Skyrim engine, like acrobatics and such. But artistically, I think the community is going to be very happy with the balance between nostalgia and remastered assets. Like Dal was saying just previously, you can't please all the people all the time. There'll always be someone who won't like parts of a project. But overall, it should work out as intended. All the things the community loved about Oblivion artistically, just in the Skyrim engine.
Dal, how about Skywind?
I'm pretty sure Zix already kind of answered this question in the Leaders of the World, or whatever the lead panel was called, panel thing. But from a 2D, 3D perspective, we are in a really fortunate situation right now, because Skyrim has something Bethesda will never have. We have endless time, even though our fans don't want to hear that we have endless time. But theoretically, we have endless time. We have no need for money. And we don't answer to any investors. We only answer to ourselves. So we want to create the Morrowind Bethesda could have done with more funds and endless time and a more modern engine, to be honest. And design-wise, we want to stay close to the original designs by Kirkbride, who was the lead concept artist back in the Morrowind days. And here and there, we're giving things which used to be extremely simplified an overhaul. For example, the tombs got a rather drastic overhaul to make them more interesting to explore, and our Vivek city got unique cantons. Every canton in Vivek is now an absolutely unique building, which you'll be able to check out in our Day 2 Skyrim panel, where we'll show off the whole city. Nudge, nudge. Generally, we're not making Morrowind HD edition, and I hope no one expects that from us. We're adding some of our own artistic vision to the game, but we still absolutely want to keep like this Morrowind feeling alive, just with a few artistic freedom here and there.
Thank you, Dal. And speaking of tombs, you're up for another rendition of those, right? If I can make a few requests.
This is probably not PG-18, so I will not answer.
All right, moving on then. Before I get yelled at, with the release of Elder Scrolls Online, did this change your perception of the culture or style of the races or people in your project or province? Let's start with Rob in Elsewhere.
In a word, no. Elsewhere for us in ESO, yes, you're welcome. It felt generic, and it suffered, as ESO does generally, with the drawbacks of being an MMO, which is that the cities are very big, the streets are very wide, the clutter is quite sparse, and there are things from Morrowind and Elsewhere, etc. Having said that, three things did stick out for me in terms of ESO. Two good and one bad. The two good were there's lots of ruined temples dotted around, which we thought was fantastic. And although we had temples in our mind, we decided that we would go hog in terms of adding temples. So that was good. And the other thing we liked was the use of cracks, crevices, and small canyons, which fits in perfectly with the aesthetic for an Equina, which is that it's going to be an empty, sparse-looking land, but it has to be fun to play and it has to have stuff to do. So we're going to make use of cracks, crevices, and small canyons as assets to hide things in. And the bad is dragons. We just it just doesn't work. It doesn't feel right. There are no dragons in Elsewhere, and there never will be, because it's just it just doesn't work with the lore and with the region.
No dragons. Dal, how about Morrowind? Any changes you've made because Morrowind came out on ESO?
First of all, I can't believe someone just spoiled the end of Morrowind in the chat. Dude, not cool.
Well,
besides that, so I wasn't on the team when ESO Morrowind came out, so I'm not sure how generally the team reacted to it. I have to admit, I just don't know. But in general speak, when we check out ESO content, we just prefer our drama robot Sotazil over the Hotuspando Sotazil. And we just want to keep this crazy essence alive. Like I said before, we follow pretty closely to the Kirkbride original concept. And the ESO style just feels, like Kettle already said, pretty bland. Like they are going safe. They want to market this to a lot of people, so they don't want to add too much crazy shit, which could just, make people not even try.
Makes sense. So the last couple questions we have are a little more personal for you as artists. The first one is, what was the hardest or easiest design or 3D object that you've worked on? And let's head back to Kettle.
Okay, overall I don't think it would be a single asset, but tile kits. The new 3D and textures for our cities and architectures have and continue to be the most challenging 3D objects to get done and in-game. As well as redesigns from the 2D crew, there are so many technical challenges with them, especially when you consider they have to retain a lot of Oblivion's footprint to allow for porting of quests and such. Architecture isn't the most popular subsection of 3D. Everyone wants to work on creatures or weapons or armors, so the difficulties in having dedicated artists for architecture is a problem in its own light. I think that's pretty common across all the major projects, though.
I mean, why would someone want to work on a pile of bricks when they could work on an ice sword or something?
We need the bricks.
Exactly, bricks are very important. Dal, how about yourself?
I would say my easiest was one of the things Kettle just said. Shit. I'm so sorry. The chat just completely had me enraged. I'm studying again. On which question were we? You're asking me what my
was the hardest
was, right?
Exactly. What was the hardest or easiest design you've worked on?
I'm sorry, I'm stop reading chat now. The easiest design for me was Nordic ringmail armor, actually, because I'm one of those people. Kettle just said I like creating creatures and armors. The cool stuff. I don't want to draw bricks. That's stupid. And for some reason, when I draw the ringmail armor, basically every iteration I made was pretty nice, and I could have just used any of these as a final version, which was super cool. So. Apparently, I'm really good at Nordic culture. So if, I don't know, Bethesda or anyone else ever wants to do a game about Nords, maybe I should apply there. I don't think it will ever happen, but I think that would be cool.
We live in hope.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we'll find out all the interesting snow magic that's going on up there. One day. How about you, Argor? We have not heard from you in a little bit.
Yeah. So currently on Beyond Skyrim, like Kettle said earlier, architecture and things like that, the larger claims, they tend to increase the amount of, the time it takes to burn out on a claim easily. So a lot of people have a hard time taking on those claims. However, I do think the end product is also more satisfying in that way, because you get to see the world come together. But the biggest problem we're trying to overcome on Beyond Skyrim right now is getting the new creature animations in game. And while we do have a nice workflow set up, thanks to some creators like Arisarn, URL Jom, just to name them off the top of my head, we still need the people, some animators who are willing to work with the new process to really make that final push. And so any animators out there who are interested in trying to tackle a challenge, it's going to make our projects, all of Beyond Skyrim, far more unique and special, in my opinion.
Just speaking for myself, personally, I think all animators are wizards. So if we have any wizards out there, please join up. We would love to have you, all of us. So
coming from the guy who writes the Mages Guild on Cyrodiil, absolutely bring wizards in.
Man, I love wizards. So the next question, Dal, what's something that you would have liked to know before starting your first ever design or 3D object?
I would just have loved to know anything about concept art, because I have to admit, I did see that video and was like, yeah, sure, I can draw. I know how to hold a pen. I will just apply. And nowadays, I would just be sent to the Arcane University straight away to just learn the basics, because I didn't know what I was doing. And I was so fortunate that my former lead, Fertzan, like the dude I devoured, taught me so much about just concept art. And nowadays, like I said, just straight away to the Arcane University, go sit down and learn your 101 concept art first. And it really had helped to have this tool, to just have a really talented person apply and say, hey, you're great, but how about you just go over there for like a week and learn the basics? That would be great.
It sounds like concept art is a different skill set from just general art, which is very important to know for any aspirants out there. So the final question of the prepared questions, what did you learn during your time with the project that you don't believe you could have learned anywhere else, or at the very least it would have taken a lot longer to learn it? And let's head back to Kettle again.
Well, for me personally, how to work, both work with and lead a team of volunteers of varying skill levels from every corner of the world. How to pull all the diverse directions people want to take with artistic design and keep a project coherent, or at least try to. It's technical, 3D especially, as technical as 3D can be. At the end of the day, these projects, it's about people. It's the people who make up the projects. That's what makes these projects what they are. And the interaction between us is without a doubt, the most complicated part of this kind of modding, but it's also definitely the most rewarding.
It's fantastic. How about Nick? We have not heard from you in a little bit.
So for me personally, working for Beyond Skyrim and Skywind really put me in a professional environment that I could only have found working in the video game industry. Having to work close with art directors, other concept artists, and the 3D department really helped me shape my skills and ability in a direction that I needed to grow as an artist. After my studies, I had no opportunity or job offer immediately, so I did my best to join the most challenging and professional environment I can in order to grow. And in the Skyrim modding community, I found that a great strong point for me personally is the constant work side by side with people who usually already are in the game industry, so they really can teach you and help you go into that direction because they know what you need, what you don't need to do, and how you need to work in order to have a professional kind of step-by-step work. So many of these peoples are usually professionals who dedicate their free time to this project. And I really think that this is one of the greatest things because it's not a way to create portfolio. It's not a place to, show up, but it's really something interesting. It's really something that brings people together with a passion. It's something that really motivates me even more. I personally had the chance to talk with many artists who contributed to this project, and that really helped me get better as an artist. And I think that this is really the best thing I could have hoped to gain from this project.
You brought something like that up before in an earlier panel, and thank you very much for bringing it up again because it is something I would like to address. The fact that you are a professional in the game development industry, yet you still work on Skywind and Beyond Skyrim, Morrowind. One thing that I know we see a lot in comments is accusations, really, that these projects are ways to build portfolios, at which point people plan to dip and get into the industry and leave it behind, when really that's not true at all. Yes, there are people here who are wanting to build a portfolio, wanting to get started in this industry, but we also, as you've just spoken to, we have people who are passionate about these games, passionate Elder Scrolls fans who, even though they've already hit the quote-unquote goal of working in the industry, they're still thrilled to be working on these projects. And then, of course, you also have some people who have careers and don't want to get into the game development industry, who are happy in their current jobs but still love these games so much they just want to contribute to these remake projects. So thank you for speaking to that. That's something that I've thought about frequently over the last couple of years, ever since I joined. So with that diatribe over, let's move into some of the audience questions. The first question from Unknown Explorer 13 asks, what are the more needed 3D skills right now for your respective projects? Let's start with Argor.
Yeah, I think I have a pretty good answer for that. Recently, I've been looking over what we need, and we're just starting on some of these smaller sub-cities, things like Such and Sanctuary, and I've noticed that we need a few more concepts, so I'd say concept art, absolutely. If you're a concept artist who wants to apply, Cyrodiil is open for that. And for other things, 3D artists, and as I said before, animators are always welcome for our end.
Great. Rob, how about yourself?
So for Elsewhere, on the 2D side, we would desperately love to have some architecture concept artists to help us to create our temple sets. And on the 3D side, and on the 2D and 3D side, we need creature artists both to design them and also to build them. So that would be what we would be really looking for.
Okay. The next question from 7 Luke, I am your father 7.
Amazing.
Let's talk about spoilers. He's asking more for Skywind and Skyblivion. Does having an existing game help in producing, or do you think it hinders your designs due to having little or less artistic liberty? And let's do Dal.
I think that's an interesting question because even in the project ourselves, even in like our Skywind bubble, even if we just ignore the public completely, we have definitely those which are super nostalgic. Like, I'm not saying that as a bad thing. They just really love Morrowind, and I think they would be perfectly fine with just getting that Morrowind HD edition. And on the other hand, there's like the other half of people which just wants to improve, which wants to have like a tiny bit of their own artistic footstep in the project they're making. So it's a bit of a diplomatic issue sometimes to find like just this concept art which is on the verge between both. That you see the object and you're like, oh yes, this is this item, but it has like a bit of the 2021 vibe. Like it's just, it's updated in some regards and it has like the artist's own style in it a tiny bit. So it's not super hindering. It's challenging. It's definitely adding a layer of challenge. And especially once we look into the public world outside of the Skyrim bubble, there are a lot of people expecting us to make Morrowind HD, and all of those will probably get, they won't get what they want, because that's not what we're doing.
Kettle, how about Skyblivion?
It can be. It's a double-edged sword. It's a bit like Dal was saying. It's not as restrictive as you would think. It's not like you go into a remake of something and you think, right, it has to be pixel perfect, like the original Beyond version. The original versions of things for 3D assets, especially, they're like a concept. They're like your starting point for your concept work. The 2D team takes care of a lot of these things, but I said it before earlier on, I don't think the community really gets how, when something's posted on Skyblivion community, like here's the redesign for such an ammo or such a thing, that's gone through like easily over a dozen different iterations back and forth between the 2D team, the 3D team, because of practicalities in the design, like Rebel, the overall lead, and creative director will have, come back, and it'll go back and forth, back and forth. It can take weeks. It can take absolutely weeks before design's like, yep, that's the original Oblivion, that's what we're going for, and then it's handed over to 3D. Like, it's not committed to 3D until, like Dal was touching on it. So there's a level of diplomacy involved amongst the team, because everyone's going to want to go a certain direction, and you can't spend 6 months deciding on a piece of clutter, like that table should have this cloth on it or that cloth on it. It's not going to happen. So you have to keep things moving as well. And again, you're not going to make everyone happy, but I don't think you can go into one of these projects and think we are going to make everyone happy. You do just kind of have to pull the trigger on things. But is it restrictive? No, not really. You have guidelines, you have boundaries that you're working, but it's not restrictive.
Fantastic answer, honestly. Because it is a negotiation. It's 50 people working on one thing at the end of the day. The next question comes from Uberman, who asks, do newer 2D artists often have difficulty adapting to the differences between drawing art and making concepts? How would the processes differ? And let's talk to Dal, since you touched on it before yourself.
Yes, so especially if you just have a really good artist, like an artwork artist, and you say, hey, could you please design me a chair? And they will render you the most beautiful chair. And then you're like, okay, but this is like a chair for a really poor person, and you like drew a throne. Could you change that? And the first step is accepting that maybe your iteration wasn't good. That's something I'm challenged with every day. That I post something and the feedback is, this is not what we want. Do something else. And you just gotta swallow your pride and be like, all right, then guy gets back to the drawing table. And so we often have artists apply which are so much better artists than I will ever be. But like I said before, there's just a really helpful way to start designing something. Like, first you start with the silhouettes, with the shapes. The very first step is you just start collecting references which describes the object for you, so you have a rough idea what you even want. And that's a tough thing for some people to swallow, that I don't want them to draw something beautiful. I don't need my first iterations to look good. If they can just take like a fat marker and draw me a shape, and I will like, yeah, I can work with that. This is good. That's like enough for the first iterations. And just scaling down scaling down your own expectations for your own art, just to be a little bit quicker in the concept art process and just to communicate easier, and slowly adding detail to a concept is something a lot of people, myself absolutely 100% included, don't know when they apply. And that's why we actually shield Arcane University so much, because that's a great way also for a seasoned artist to just go in there, get a claim, and just do the really clean concept art process once. And then they can pretty much apply anywhere, because the process is just more or less the same all through the whole gaming industry, or wherever, even for movies. It's just the same everywhere.
And to carry off of that, yeah, the AU absolutely is great at that, because they take you step by step through the process. And I see them. I talk to the teachers there and watch how they go. One thing I do want to point out is that drawing concepts is something more akin to a halfway point between almost engineering mindset and art. It's almost like blueprinting. You have to. It's less about it looking good, as Dal said, and more so about breaking it apart into its individual constituent pieces and trying to get the point across of the asset. So, say it's a chair, like it was decided, which like Dal talked about before. You have to think, how is each leg connected to the rest of the chair? What is the point of the chair? Is it a high-class chair? Is it supposed to emanate nobility, or is it supposed to be something some poor tavern keeper threw together real quick? And then beyond that, different angles, just like in a blueprint, showing all different angles and materials it's made of. All these things come together to help the artist know what they have to do to put it together. That's kind of why it's very similar to blueprinting. It's kind of like making a list of instructions on how you want the person who's going to put it together to come together with it. So just keep that in mind when drawing concept art, I would say. And one last thing is that having an art background is a fantastic foundation for drawing concept art, because it gives you the tools you need to actually get it done. So definitely pursuing that aspect of it is a fantastic starting point as well.
Thank you very much for that. Those very detailed answers, Dal and Argor. I feel educated. I feel like I could draw something beyond a stick figure now. Thank you. So the last question I think we'll have time for comes from Reed Stilt. And he's asking Rob, for Elsewhere, are you sticking with your original vision of the Palmar as a more cat-like creature, or going with ESO's giant humanoid Khajiit version? Also, what's a Palmar?
An easy one. I'm not actually 100% sure. It's one of the first docs. I suspect it's probably one of the bigger ones. I don't know them all by name. But I do know that we'll be sticking with our vision for the Palmer and for all of the other first docs.
Didn't Elsewhere draw the concept art for the first docs that many people believe was like made by Bethesda or something?
I have heard that.
It's also in the wheel, like in the background. You sometimes see like this image with all of the cats, and that's actually from Beyond Skyrim.
Yeah, it's from somebody called Waffles. They drew it actually before I joined the team, but it has been reposted so often, and it is quite often posted as having come from Bethesda, and it's actually Beyond Skyrim, which is quite funny. So that's what we will be using. That very, very well known image that's actually on this chat. It's part of the Elsewhere parts.
So the very last question, I guess I lied. Unknown Explorer 13 asks, would you like more people with NIF experience to join your projects? And why is the answer yes?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're always, I think all the projects are always looking for people with NIF experience, but probably at a level above just being able to implement statics. I think the team are fairly covered with that, with tools like CK Command. Like there's been tools that have come out that help a lot with the automation. But if you're slightly more advanced with NIFs, it can work with collisions, special effects, like basic animations like NI controllers, things like that. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Speaking as a level designer, nothing quite gets me as excited as knowing a new trap is coming down the pipe.
Mm-hmm.
That's a common request, absolutely.
Oh, I love them. I love them. Well, thank you everyone for joining me on this panel. I have been UCM and still remain UCM. And next up, everyone else will be remaining here for the art panel, for the, fan art contest. We just did the art panel. So thank you everyone, and see you again in 15 minutes, I guess.
Thank you.
Thanks, UCM.
See you there.
See you in a bit.
Be there.
See you then.